Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino series. On this episode, we talk with competitive martial artist, nurse, cosplayer, and fantasy author Danielle Orsino. She has a wide array of talents, and we get into a great talk about her life. She was inspired to write her current series by a patient who needed a distraction during IV therapy. Each day, she would tell him a story, and he encouraged her to share that story with the world. And from there, the series was born. She was a cosplayer and began dressing up as her characters, and that led to her publishers placing her on the covers of her series. Over the course of our interview, she talks about her life in music, martial arts, writing, meeting her hero, Linda Carter, and so much more. It's a great one. Enjoy this.
Thanks for being patient, and it's great to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, you have such a unique mix of skills that are a part of who you are. You're a competitive martial artist, nurse, fantasy author, cosplay. You got all these things going on. And before we get to those specifically, how have you been doing? You seem like you're a very active person. How has this last 2 years of COVID been for you? What have you learned about yourself? How have you survived?
I was very lucky before I moved to Charlotte. I just moved to Charlotte probably about 6-7 months ago. I was up in New York. And so I happened to I was teaching at a boxing gym, and I had the keys to the boxing gym, so I could go there and work out alone. So I really didn't miss a beat in that sense. I was able to work out, in a gym by myself. So in that sense, I learned probably that working out is such a luxury in one sense, but a necessity for my own mental health in another aspect. That as much as people are like, working out, like either you do it or you don't, it's no big deal. For me, I needed it. I needed a break from writing. Like that was my refuge. I had to get to the boxing gym. That helped with any blockage or anything like that, any writer's block, but I just needed to keep moving for my own, emotional well-being. So that was, I didn't realize how much I relied on it.
Well, and I think that's the thing that I hear more and more is that there is these silver linings and these things that happen. As much as this has been bad, there's been a level of being adaptable and learning new things and hopefully being stronger now as the world opens back up.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. I think I realized how much just staying moving and staying focused and being able to go inward a little bit, like, I'd lose myself in the bag, just hitting the bag a little, and block everything else that was going on out, and just being able to, get lost in the flow and that moving meditation a little bit. I think that was a big thing that I probably took for granted before. And I realized I don't necessarily, as much as I didn't mind group classes, because that's what I had been doing up to that point, I didn't mind working out by myself and just kind of, getting lost in that moment and in that flow, that kind of thing. And I was so grateful to have it. It's like I said, it's a luxury on one sense. And, I was very lucky to be able to do that because I'm not a runner. A lot of people are like, oh, I go running and I kind of get my runner's high and I'm alone. That was never my thing. Hitting and kind of being combative was. I took it for granted up to that. And I was so grateful to be able to, for Manny, the owner and my coach, to just hand me the keys and say, go.
Yeah, and during this time, what a great thing to have that divergence, to have that, that level of like kind of shutting everything off, because I think that's the thing. It's like there was just stretches of weeks where you just didn't even want to look at the news, didn't want to see what was going on. You just had to escape into some meditative place like a gym, or, a musician might play an instrument, you had to go there.
Oh,
for sure.
Totally. 100%. I needed to. I got back to, doing some forms a little bit and getting, like I said, just getting really lost in it and rediscovering that piece that for so long was competitive, not to have to compete and just going through the motions a little bit and reconnecting with the body, I think was a nice distraction from everything.
Yeah.
It reminded me of why I really started doing it to begin with.
That's wonderful. So are you originally from New York? Okay. So talk to me a little bit about your childhood and how these dreams of yours kind of came to fruition.
I don't know. I don't know if I could ever really say that I sat back and was like, one day I'm going to be a writer. My dad will tell you he has an essay from second grade that said I wanted to be a writer, but the following week I also wrote an essay saying I wanted to be Wonder Woman. So, go figure. I always wanted to be Wonder Woman. I can tell you that from day one, that was my dream, was to be Wonder Woman. I have a Wonder Woman tattoo. Wonder Woman was my hero. So I was always influenced by comic books and by strong women. That was, from Yvonne Craig's Batgirl to Linda Carter's Wonder Woman, and even to Bruce Lee, seeing him on the Green Hornet. That, those were like, when I saw that, I was just like, whoa, that was kind of my moment. I didn't want to be Robin, but seeing Kato was that, wait a minute, who's this dude? He gets to drive the car. He doesn't need a utility belt. What's going on here? That was those were my moments of, hold on, like, this is different. Who is this? And then, Yvonne Craig, she had the Batgirl cycle, and she dressed really cool, and she didn't need to ever hit anybody. She could just kick, and it was, the bad guys were taken out. And then, Linda Carter twirled onto my screen, and the world stopped. And it was like, I need to be her. That's who I need to be. And I think that probably made the most indelible mark on my life, with seeing her and deciding I need to be her. I don't know how, because I was so little. I was just like, I don't know. But for me, it was, she's beautiful, she's strong, she can keep up with the boys, but she's still Wonder Woman. That's what I want to be. And I played Wonder Woman every day. My dad made me tinfoil bracelets, and he would say that I was the easiest kid to babysit because he could just make tinfoil balls, throw them at me, and I would block them. And that's what I would do all day. And I was a happy little clam. So that
Nice.
kind of molded me moving forward, that my question when they would be like, what do you want to do when you grow up? My first thing would be like, I think I want to do this, but do other women do it? And if the answer was yes, there are women who do that, I'd be like, no, then I don't want to do that. I was always looking for whatever women don't do a lot of, then that's what I want to do. I was kind of always in that, I want to be the first. I want to be, whatever women don't do, then I kind of want to head down that path. I think just Wonder Woman and just strong female role models, that molded me and kind of became the thing. I didn't know I'd go into martial arts. I wasn't out searching for that. I just fell into it by total accident. It wasn't something I went searching for, kind of like writing and all of that. And Wonder Woman was a nurse in the comic books, so I went down, I followed everything that she did. I kind of followed down that path. For martial arts, I wanted to go to New Orleans with my girlfriend. And my dad was like, yeah, my 18-year-old is not going to New Orleans by herself with her best friend from sixth grade. He's like, that's not happening. He's like, that's really cute that you think it's going to happen, but no. And then he said, I'll make you a deal. If you get your yellow belt in Taekwondo, you can go. And he was just thinking, this is never going to friggin' happen, but sure. Yeah, go ahead. And the gym I belonged to happened to have a Taekwondo program, and he knew the instructor because he had belonged to the gym years ago. So he knew the guy, and he was like, yeah, go do that, and I'll let you go. And I walked into the program wearing sweatpants and a crop top, chewing gum, walked in front of all the black belts, stood at the end with them, chewing gum, hand on my hip, being everything you should not be in a martial arts school, and called the gentleman by his first name and was like, yeah, I'm totally here to take some karate classes. Like, as disrespectful as you could be, that was me. The guy was like, okay, why do you want to take it? I'm like, I just want to go to New Orleans. I don't really care about anything else. I just have to get my yellow belt, so my dad will let me go. And the guy was just like, and he was looking at me chewing gum in my little sports bra, crop top, sweatpants like rolled down to my hips, makeup on my face, not taking anything seriously. And he was like, really? And he looked down and he was like, you need to go stand down at the end. And I'm like, the kids are down there. I'm an adult. And he was like, I just remember him laughing at me, like, and now I know he was laughing like, oh, we're going to have so much fun with this one. And it was a maniacal laugh. And he was just like, okay. And he's like, can you do a push-up? And I looked at him and I was like, yeah, and I don't do girly push-ups. I do real ones. And he's like, great, come with me. And he walked me to the back of the class. And it was, like the all-purpose rooms with the wooden floors. And he's like, why don't you get on your knuckles and show me a push-up? And I did. And he's like, great, can you hold it? And I'm holding it. And then I'm still holding it. A couple minutes has gone by. My arms are starting to shake. I'm sweating. And he got down and he's like, so here's the deal. He's like, one of us is going to leave here either in a body bag or it will be my greatest accomplishment. He's like, do you understand what I'm saying? And I was like, and I'm like, yeah. He's like, what? And I started to fall and he's like, I would hold that if I were you. I'm like, yes. He's like, yes. And I'm like, sensei. And he's like, no, that's Japanese. He's like, it's sabanim. He's like, this is Korean. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, good, stand up, go wash the makeup off your face, go get a real t-shirt and get back in here and be ready to learn. And I went, did everything and came back. My friend was like, yeah, I'm done. I'm not going back in there. For some reason, I walked back in. That was my first lesson. I learned a down block and a stretch kick. And after 1 month, I never paid for another lesson for 10 years. I only paid the first month. And I was hooked. And I started competing after my yellow fourth tip. So it was maybe a year in that he sent me along on my first tournament. And I was, like I said, I was hooked. And that was it. It was kind of history.
So do you look back on him? Is he a big mentor, a big person in your life?
Yeah, Mr. McLaughlin was my instructor. I never called him John again. That was the one and only time I ever called him John. Yeah, he was, looking back, I didn't realize what he was doing for me at the time. And I don't think he realized what I was going to be to him either. I think we were just kind of finding each other. But yeah, I mean, even my first tournament experience, he signed me up without my knowledge, told me come to the school to clean the school, and then said, oh, we've got to go get some cleaning supplies. And he said, get your gear bags so we don't have to go back in. And I did, and then he just drove me and dropped me off at a tournament. And he's like, yeah, I mean, literally, I pulled up to a middle school, saw a bunch of people going in who, had their uniforms or their bags, and he was like, yeah, I signed you up for a tournament. He's like, you're competing today, get out of the car. And it was like a tuck and roll situation, and he just kicked me out.
Wow.
And I was like, what? He was like, yeah, go see the registration desk. And that was my first tournament. And,
wow.
I won. It was great, but he was like, if you want to keep competing, he's like, I will come to one tournament a year and watch you. He's like, but now you're on your own. And so I just drove all up and down, the Northeast competing alone, and he would come once a year and just kind of evaluate me, see where I was at, and that was it. But he, in class, he was great. He totally groomed me, but his attitude was, if you want it, you'll do this on your own, and, we'll work together to get you there. And his whole thing was, I want you to make a national tournament team, and I want you, he had plans for me. He was always a mentor. He always had, my best interest at heart, but he was definitely of the old school. Mr. Cho was his first instructor, who was the coach of the Korean team in the movie Best of the Best with Eric Roberts. That was his first instructor. So he came from that old school Taekwondo, style. And that's how he taught. He was a little warmer, but, you would never beat him in sparring. Like when we sparred, he would laugh as he sparred me, because it was like you weren't getting a hit in. He was always trying to teach me. He was a great guy. Eventually if you talk to most martial artists, they're still not with their first instructor. We all kind of have a falling out with our first instructor because you outgrow them. I moved on from him to Vincent Lin, Sifu Vincent Lin. I moved on to Kung Fu. And then from there, I moved on to Wushu and stuff. I still talk to Sifu Lin. I was with him for a number of years, and that's where I worked with The Rock for the Super Bowl commercials and things like that. And then, went on to compete with the WKA world team to represent Team USA at the World Championships and things like that. My martial art career, I owe a lot to it, and it was absolutely a ball.
So let's go into your life as an author. What was the first story that you wrote? Like, what was it or when was it that you really felt like this is something that I can publish or that I feel really good about?
The first thing I ever had published was actually a paper in nursing school that I wrote on multiple sclerosis. And then I never considered myself an author. I always thought when I was in nursing school, I had two teachers that were really pushing me toward research because I seemed to have a knack for it. Mrs. Hawkins and Mrs. Hollander, they were both, when I was in nursing school, they were both like, look, you should really, as soon as you get out of here, you should go back to school and pursue, a mid-level provider or research. They were pushing me, and when I had this hypothesis on multiple sclerosis, because I was working with a lot of MS patients in clinicals, I come up with a theory and a hypothesis, and they were like, you should do something with this. This is a great idea. Like, take it, do something. So they pushed me to write the paper, and I wound up getting it published and into a contest from the International Organization of Multiple Sclerosis Nurses. And I won a grant, and they published the paper. That was the first thing I had published, but I didn't consider myself an author or anything like that. I didn't even think I had a knack for writing. I was just kind of like, all right, this is really cool. I'm going to pursue this and either go into research or get my nurse practitioning license, something like that. So as soon as I left nursing school, I got a job thinking, this is where I'm going to go with it. I'm definitely going to continue. Then I kept kind of moving on in nursing because if you're going to go into nurse practitioning, you have to have certain, clinical specialties and clinical experiences under your belt because you want to get picked for the programs and things like that. It's competitive. And I was kind of deciding between NP or physician's assistant. So I wanted to have all my bases covered. So I was jumping from, general practice. I did dermatology. I was doing different things. And then I applied, I got my IV certification, and I applied to a Lyme disease clinic. And I was like, all right, I'll spend a year here while I'm finishing out all my prerequisites for the NP programs and for the physician assistant programs. So I have like a little specialty, and this will look really good. And that's what I did. And while I was there, I met a patient, and we both started the exact same day. He started his drip protocol, and I started sticking that day. He was my first stick. Like, it was just, we were walking down that path together. I really thought, I'm applying. I was in TASPA, which is the physician assistant cycle. So you go in this database and you apply to all different programs because every physician assistant program has different prereqs. None of them are the same. So you kind of go in this database and you find out which programs you match with, and then you can apply, and they all have different due dates, the whole thing. So I was in the protocol. I was in this whole thing. And this patient and I became very close. So he was driving up from Pennsylvania, and then he relocated his whole life to White Plains. So he had 5 hours was his drive. And then he just relocated to Westchester County, was living here to drip every single day. This doctor that I worked for had a very aggressive approach to Lyme. So he was dripping every single day. I was the nurse. I was the IV nurse for weekends and every major holiday. So I was there on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, New Year's, the whole thing. And like I said, him and I became very close. After about a year and a half, he told the doctor, I've got to get back to work. They struck up a deal where he would come up on Wednesdays, drive 5 hours, drip for 2, turn around and go home, and then come up Friday and stay Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, turn around and go home. Now, I kind of knew this wasn't going to last. It was just too much on him, but this was the only way the doctor would agree to treat him. So after about a month of it, I had rearranged my schedule so I would be there Wednesdays and see him. I worked with the doctor during the day, seeing sick patients. And after about a month, he'd come to me and he's like, Danny, I don't want to do this anymore. I just can't. And so I was like, okay, well, you got to stay in your seat. So what are we going to do? And he's like, well, then keep me in the seat. Do something. He's like, tell me something, tell me a story. I don't care. Entertain me. So we started talking. I said, tell me something interesting about yourself. And he was like, well, I was recruited by the CIA out of college. And I'm like, well, darn, that's kind of interesting. And I said, did you take the job? And he's like, no, because if you leave before your 10-year mark, they pretty much disavow you. Like, you can't put it on your resume, nothing. And I'm like, oh, you should have taken it. We could have found out what was in Roswell. You know, we were just going down like the whole conspiracy theory rabbit hole. You know, usual stuff. You know, you think about the government and all that stuff. We started talking about it, and then I said, well, you could have been a secret agent. He's like, no, it was for the Trends and Intentions Division. Like, the most boring part. He's like, I just would have sat there, like, poring over articles and, you know, looking for little nods about where the next hot spot is. So we made a couple jokes. I said, well, you know where Lyme comes from. And he's like, yeah, Plum Island, once again, rabbit hole, we're down it. And to this day, I don't know what made me say it. I was not reading any books about the Fae, nothing like that. I said, no, Lyme comes from the Fae. And he's like, the what? And I'm like, you know, fairies. They don't like how we're treating the planet. This is them getting back at us. And he just looked at me and he was like, yeah, I don't know what you mean. And I'm like, come on. I was like a big secret agent guy like you. And I just started weaving a story right there. And I'm like, yeah, the Fae. I was like, you know, and he's like, who are they? And I was like, come on, I know why you're really here. And I was like, big CIA agent guy? I said, you're here to see if the nurse is really the brains behind this whole Lyme operation. I was like, you want to know if she's a Fae-human hybrid. And you're here to bring her back. You're going to grab her, bring her back to, you know, your government operation. And he was like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And so I just wove this story and put him in it about the Fae and their fallen angels, and their, you know, who didn't get involved in the war between God and Lucifer. And I just made up this story off the top of my head. And every time he came in for his treatment, I sat down and told him another piece of it. And I was just making it up. I wasn't thinking about it, was just making things up. Like the doctor had a big black dog. So when the dog would come in, I'd be like, oh, and you know, the king of the dark Fae had a black dragon. And I would just make whatever happened in the IV room, I added it. And I made this patient the protagonist and made him the CIA agent who was there to find out, you know, what was going on with the nurse and whatever. Wasn't thinking anything. And he sat and he listened. And at the end, he was like, you have to go and write this down. He's like, you need to go. You need to write this story down. This is incredible. And I was like, yeah, no. I'm going to PA school, or I'm going to nurse practitioning school. Like, I'm going to go make my money. I'm not going to go be a writer. And he's like, no, you need to. And other patients who had heard bits and pieces were saying the same thing. They were like, no, you have to go write this down. They were like, I need to know what happens to the king and the queen of the Fae, the CIA agent. They were like, I need to know. And so I had some things happen that were like, the universe was definitely pushing me toward writing. And I wound up writing it down. And I think out of it, I have 9 books written right now, 4 are out. And so I was picked up by a publisher, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Wow, that's incredible. And I'm curious how all of this works for you. You know, you've got nursing, you know, you're a competitive martial artist, you're an author, you have all of these things that, you know, on the one hand could be left brain, on the other hand or right brain. How do those kind of arc together and make you who you are?
It was really funny because they all somehow worked. It was kind of interesting because I have a lot of fight scenes, and those worked. They went hand in hand with martial arts because I was able to take my experience in sparring and in forms and translate it onto paper fairly easily. I don't have big sweeping battle scenes that you would see in maybe Lord of the Rings. I have these close combat ones. I received a lot of credit for that I think, you know, one reviewer said if, you know, DC needs to look at how she writes her fight scenes because they're better than what we see on screen. You know, they're closer contact and you can visualize what's happening. So the martial arts translated really well with sword fighting and with, you know, hand-to-hand combat. So that worked out great. And then when I get later on in the series, where I hone in on my patient's literary persona, Agent Graham, I have to give medical reasons for why there's a Fae-human hybrid and how it works. And I wound up doing a whole paper on it and gave it to actually Mrs. Hawkins, one of my nursing instructors. And I asked her to read it, and I'm like, does this make sense? And she came back, and she's like, yeah, you took all your nursing stuff and this actually makes a lot of sense medically. So it worked when I had to do my dragons for the first half of the series. When I built the dragons, I sat there thinking, I don't want them to just be, just dragons or fire breathers because, oh, that's what dragons do. I wanted to give them a physiological reason for it. So I sat there and thought, what if I build them from the inside out, from the digestive system out? So I researched bacteria and really looked at the digestive system. And that's how I made my dragons. So my ice breathers, acid breathers, and fire breathers all come from bacteria that would live, and that's how they have these oral defenses. So I took my AMP and put that to use in order to have, these mythical creatures. So I always joke that if I was on Mythbusters, maybe I'd be plausible. Not confirmed, but plausible. So, my medical background wound up working out pretty well for it. And it meshed. And it was actually pretty cool.
So a lot of things that you've explained, stories and vignettes, I can see this being something that could turn your life into a movie. Who would be the actress that would play you?
Probably somebody like a Jennifer Love Hewitt. If I had to pick somebody like off the top of my head, somebody like that. Or I need somebody who could fight though. So, somebody'd have to be able to, throw a good left cross. I'm a southpaw, so that's a little harder to find. But yeah, I need somebody who can actually kick and make it look good, and who can hold a IV needle correctly.
Right
so
on.
they'd have to do some searching for that a little bit.
Yeah.
But and she's got to be a little Italian Puerto Rican girl. I'm
nice.
I'm on the shorter side. So if you can find that, we're in business. But and have a little comic book knowledge, and then we'd be all set.
You have many books out. You've been down a lot of roads here with fans. What's been one of the best fan experiences or comment or something that you've gotten back from someone that just sticks or that kind of blew you away?
I had a fan. Her name was Wendora, and she reached out to me on Instagram when book one first came out because she actually had a rescue dog named Aurora, who's the Queen Aurora is the lead in the series. And her dog happened to look like my dog, Penelope, and she knew that, my dogs play a big part in the books. And as we were talking, she had mentioned that she thought her cancer was in remission, but later came back and said that, she had to go back through chemo. So I happened to send her book one as something to just, so she had something to read during chemo. And she was very touched by it. And we stayed in touch during the process. And then her cancer returned, and she was in hospice later on. So we were talking while she was in hospice, and she had said the one thing she wanted was to be a fae. So that was her last wish. So I wound up writing her in, and she became a fae. And so from this point on, she is a character in the book from now on. And we while she was in hospice in her last, and she was able to still text and DM, we came up with the character, we came up with the faction she was a part of, and everything like that. And so she would have an ongoing character in the series named after her. That was one of her last wishes, was to be a fae. And that's what we did. And I stayed in touch with her family afterwards. They actually sent me one of her books that was close to her heart when she passed. There's a dedication in book 2 to her, but her character is mentioned later on in I believe it's book 5, and then I'm writing a novella right now where her character is prominently featured, and that was probably one of my most touching experiences, to know that this was somebody's last wish, was to be in my world in the Vale, and that's what they wanted. That was like a blow me away moment, that this is what they thought of while in hospice, was to be a fae and be one of my fae. And the family to this day is still in touch with me. And that still brings a tear to my eye that, somebody thought that much. And she's probably influenced my writing moving forward. She's definitely influenced my writing. Like, I always think of, where can I put Wendora in it?
That's wonderful. let me ask you this, just kind of, and this isn't a regret question. It's more of just looking back on your life and using the wisdom that you have. If you have a dream tonight and you run into the younger version of yourself, around the time you're really getting out there in the world and doing things, and you could give your younger version one piece of advice based on what you've learned throughout all these years, what would it be?
Not to care so much about what people think. That would probably be my first thing, is don't worry so much. I'm a geek at heart. I'm a nerd. So that's always been hard for me to make connections in that sense. Geek culture right now is really cool. It's geek chic. But, at the time that I was kind of coming up through it, it was not. Comic-Con was not, when I was doing it, was not what it is now. Now you go to Comic-Con and it's cool. But when I was going at first, it was not, it's not what it was. So it was kind of hard. So I would probably, that's one of the things I would say, is don't worry about it. Yeah, you're a nerd, but it's cool. It's okay. And have a little more fun. Don't take things so super seriously. You'll find your place. It's all going to work out. It's going to be okay. Just take a breath. Obviously, to do what I've done, I'm a very competitive person. It's okay to relax a little bit, have fun, and that, you'll be okay. You'll do this. It'll all work out in the end.
So if you can meet one person that's alive on this planet right now, who would it be?
Oh, Linda Carter. That's an easy one.
Yeah, I had a feeling. I had a feeling.
Linda Carter. I went and saw her when she sang at the Lincoln Jazz Center a couple years ago. She did a concert. And it was right around, I think it was a couple of days before Halloween. And so I went dressed up thinking everybody will be dressed up. It's right before, it was literally like October 28th. So I thought everybody's going to be dressed up. First of all, it's New York, So yeah. I went full costume. Because it was a little chillier out, I had like navy blue jeans on. But I had the corset, the headband, all of it. And I walked in there, I had a little like cape on, and I threw the cape off and looked at everybody, and nobody was in costume. It was only me. And I'm looking around like, oh crap, there's 150, 200 people in here, and I am the only one in a tiara. And so these old people are looking up at me, and they're literally disgusted by my corset, and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe. And I just look, I'm like, screw off, she's my hero. And I am dead center. And I'm like, it's okay. Like, I'm still trying to be as proud as possible, but I am laced to Jesus in this corset. And so probably about halfway through the concert, and all of a sudden she puts her hand up to her eyes and starts looking. And my husband's looking at me, and he's like, here it comes. And I'm like, here what comes? He goes, just wait for it. And meanwhile, I'm crying. Like, the whole thing is like, the queen's in front of me. I'm just dying right now. And he goes, here it comes. And so she goes, stop the concert. She goes, please turn the house lights up. And I'm like, oh, somebody in trouble. And she goes, there is somebody here dressed like me. And I'm like, oh, thank God, there's another idiot here dressed like me. And I'm like, oh, thank God. Meanwhile, DC's in the front row. So she's like, honey, can you please stand up? And I'm looking around. I'm waiting for this other idiot to stand up. So I'm like, yeah, who are they? And I'm looking around. Meanwhile, the whole place turns and looks at me. And I'm still looking around. I'm like, who are they? I'm like, stand up. I'm like, thank God it's not me. And my husband's like, she's talking to you. I'm like, oh, no. The queen is not addressing me. I was like, please, because I will die right here. And she's going, sweetie, stand up. You look beautiful. And he goes, she's talking to you, babe. And I literally start bursting into tears. I'm like, what? And she's going, stand up. You look amazing. And I slowly stand up. Like, my knees are shaking. I don't know what to do. And she starts doing the bracelet blocking to me. And wow. She's like, you look amazing. And I'm like, I can die. I can die a happy girl. Like, and she's like, I love it. It's amazing. And I'm like, and my jaw's on the floor. I don't know what to do. And I look at the old people, and I'm like, yeah, suck it now, people.
That's right.
You feel stupid. And I'm like, and she's like, I love it. And I don't know. And all of a sudden, the row of DC execs stand up, turn around, look at me, and all of a sudden their cameras start going off, their phones start going off. And I'm like, I just sat there like, I don't know what to do with myself, because she's talking to me. And she's waving, and then she does like the fake spin, like she's going to spin, and I'm like doing it back, and I was like, yeah, I can just, and my husband had to literally sit me back down because I was shaking, and then she just continued with the concert. And I was like, yeah, and everybody's looking at me now, they're clapping. I'm like, yeah, you were all making fun of me when I first walked in. Now look, Linda Carter picked me out of all you people. Yeah.
Look at me now.
Yep.
I could retire this question now because I don't know that anybody's going to be able to have an answer better than that. that is definitely dream realized right there.
Oh, that was
sure.
That was my moment. I was like, yep, that's everything I ever wanted right there. And then, she was rushed out afterwards and she waved and I was just like, take me with you, but that's okay. I got it. No problem. I was a very happy camper. I met Jason Momoa at Comic-Con. I had won a lottery to get a picture taken with him because he was doing like photo ops before Aquaman. And I met him. I had won the contest to just meet him, and I got like 2 extra minutes. And he was absolutely the nicest guy in the world. I was amazed at how nice he was. He didn't like the first picture we took. So he went to take a second one, and his handlers were like, no, sir, there's no time. And he turned around and he goes, I'm sorry. I said I did not like the first one, and she won the contest. She gets another picture because I don't like the picture. And I was like, oh, well, you heard the man. And we took a picture, and then he found out I was a personal trainer, so he started telling me his Aquaman workout and then asking me questions about it. And I was just standing there going, yeah, that sounds like a great workout. He's like, yeah, I'm doing like javelin throws. He's like, can you imagine that? And I'm looking at him going, okay, yeah. He's like, how many reps do you think I should be doing? And I'm standing there going, okay, 15 sound good. Yeah, all right, I'll take that. And he just sat there talking to me, and I was like, sure, okay. And they kept like rushing him, and he was like, I'm still talking. And he got back to me, and he was like, do you have any questions? And meanwhile, I took my friend who just giggled the whole time. I don't think she said one coherent word at all. And he was just like BSing, and I'm like, okay. And I was dressed up as Harley Quinn. And he was like, I'm so glad you came in costume because you wouldn't believe how many people come in street clothes and want to act like we just met and we're good friends. He's like, they do know it says Comic-Con on the background, right? And he's like, but you came dressed up. And when we went to like get close, I said, oh, I don't want to get makeup on your shirt. And he looked at me, he goes, I can take it off. Do you know how many of these I have? And I'm like, oh, you could take it. And my friend just thought she was going to pass out. I went, you better keep it on for her sake. And he was like, don't worry about it. Get close. And I was like, okay. And he was just like, he was totally awesome. And I'm like, I've almost met the whole Justice League. I just need Cavill and Affleck and like Godot, and we're good. I'm like, I got all of them. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
Cosplays afforded me some cool stuff too. So I'm happy.
Totally. Yeah, that's awesome. So everyone, all of these different levels of who you are have touched and been around a lot of people. So everyone has a perception of you, your family, your friends, your fans, those that you've worked with, but ultimately you live your life. You have a perception of who you think you are. Who do you think you are?
That's an excellent, excellent question. I like to think that I'm still learning who I am. I don't know that, I think it's in flux and there's a certain ebb and flow to who I am and that I'm still evolving and just, maybe just a creative being that's here to have a human experience. I'm not here to do any harm. I'm just here to learn and leave a mark that will make somebody happy. But I'm just still learning who I am. I'm still experiencing it because every day is a new experience. Obviously I have the materialistic goals that everybody has. I want to be a best-selling author. And I want to do some good in this world. I want to save, all the furry animals and save all the little puppies and do all that. And I want to, make my dad proud and do those type of things. But I'd like to think that I'm just a creative soul looking for the human experience and then trying to make the most out of the time I'm given.
I love that answer. Danielle, this has been wonderful. Before we go, I want to get to the good business of letting everybody know where they can learn more about you, any, how they can pick up your books and anything related to your world, where's the best place to go?
There's a couple places you can find me. You can find me on my website at birthofthefae.com. You can find me on Instagram at birthofthefae_novel. And then I have a really cool place that you can check out the books, especially Locked Out of Heaven, at this app called Bookie Call. And it's kind of like Booty Call, but Bookie Call. And what it is kind of think of it as a dating app for books. You can swipe right or left, and it will find you your perfect book date. And I think it's really cool. I've teamed up with them, and Locked Out of Heaven, my first book, is on there, and you can kind of check out your perfect book date. And it'll give you a dating profile on these books, and you can kind of decide if that's a book you want to get to know, and it'll take you to the physical copies, the ebooks, or the audiobooks. So I think it's cool. They're on Instagram, and then you can download the app as well and kind of check them out. And then you can always find out more about me on fourhorsemanpublications.com. And then I'm found on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, and all the usual places that you can find, great books.
And Danielle, you're wonderful. Thank you for taking time out, opening up about your life. Good luck with everything.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. This has been great.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, and music around the globe. Most of the music on these episodes comes from Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino in the iTunes Store. You can see these out on the Neon Jazz YouTube channel. And for everything Joe Dimino related, go to joedimino.com. And there you can kick into the cause via PayPal or Patreon. Until next time.